what they look like, what they come from. It means you never give that person. And it doesn't really matter if that person is from a particular continent or a particular race. It's kind of like right from basically not giving other people a chance to actually tell you or make you realize who they are, and just judging them just by the way they appear. That's how it makes it. So unfairness is what comes to my mind. Instinctively, this comes.
Okay, so unfairness is a key word.
We have another hand in the
We have another hand in the.
Some people try to say that racism is the way racism is, the way actions and stems that you consider racism. So, for example, who looking for accommodation and your name is maybe Ibrahim Muhammad, and they say sorry, it's filled up. Let me use my name. The difficult thing to have. They say sorry, and your friend is Jennifer Parker, they allow us to use. That's actually happens to me. When you go for a job and they see and they say sorry, they're not interested in you, it hurts. But if you now compare your own career with your occasion, actually find that some they are not there because they don't have limitation. And when you talk about our black people, many of them say, especially those that they drive the car, they don't do anything right. Then they say, okay, it's racism. What is it? It's not racism, it's just going and keeps happening and happening. What is it?
So you raise a very important point, which is racism looks differently to different people. And even when we try to get definitions of racism, it's very hard to find the same definition. Why? Because it's felt differently. There's a feeling to the concept of racism. And we have more people, yay! Yeah, so different people are going to experience it differently. And the other thing I've also noticed is the same thing could happen to different people, and different people actually take it differently because of how they experience one of the concepts we are going to go into, which is power. How they feel either empowered or their power taken away. Some people may not feel it the same way, and yet others may really feel that their power is being taken away. I can't see the chat from here, but I'm wondering what's on the chat.
Nothing yet.
Nothing yet? Okay. Those of you who are listening, could you please share with us your thoughts on racism? We do have a comment here while you type.
First, I want to make sure that intent is respected in the space, and those of us who may not want to be in pictures or video or audio recording are not going to be there.
When we kind of send the information out, we made a note that there will be recording, but you are not currently in any video.
Your voice may be recorded, but not your face.
Your voice will be recorded. So do you want us to give you a phone for that? Would you like to give us a consent for your voice to be recorded? No. Okay, we will make sure to, if you're talking, we will talk with you.
Except it's streaming also, I think, on YouTube, so it's gonna be hard. But you could type into a chat. You can type it into a chat.
Write what you want to tell us.
But thank you for raising that. That's very important. The people who are on Zoom are able to click and say they're okay with the recording. So Yeah, that's happening. So this is being recorded. You probably had that from the bot. So any thoughts about racism, which we kind of all know, but sometimes it's hard to put into words. It's usually easier to put into stories, easier for us to explain. Oh, yeah, so racism feels like my power is being taken away, absolutely, which is kind of what you said, unfair, that disempowerment, that is what it feels like. And if we go into some definitions of racism and racial terms, we'll see, just a second. We'll see how people get disempowered by this concept of racism through different terms such as, this is one thing that really bothers me. A lot of times, the same people who are being victims of racism are the people who are having these conversations. And so it's kind of like, feels like that broken record that we are talking to ourselves. But actually, we would like to take this further. And by the time we get to the end, hopefully we would have gotten to a place of action. So when we talk about racism, like I've said, it's not necessarily the same definition because of how we experience power or how disempowered we feel. And sometimes it's going to depend on sometimes proximity to those in power, and sometimes they allow you in a little bit and then you feel a little bit empowered. But the minute you feel that you're being kind of kicked to the curb or pushed to the back of the line, then it really, really feels unfair and you feel like your power has been stolen away, as some of you have shared. So I'm going to read a definition by Dr. Nifley. I like this definition. It's the use of power at individual, institutional, and cultural levels to oppress culturally diverse individuals based on perceived biological inferior characteristics. I'm going to repeat that. My favorite word here is perceived, because a lot of times when racism occurs, it's because of perception, what that other person thinks of you, what lands in their mind. That's why I asked you, when you think of the word racism, what does it feel like in your body? Because a racist person is caused to be racist because of something within themselves that gets moved, some toxic poison that gets released, and they feel a rage that they feel that they have to use against another person. There was a hand up there. What was going on? It's fine. Okay. So racism usually occurs when there is power imbalance. And that could be at any level. And we have the three main levels. We'll be looking at the individual level, the institutional level, and at the cultural level. One culture feeling more inferior than the other, or institutionally, procedures and processes that have been put in place to allow other people to have an easier access to opportunities, to situations more than others. And also, of course, at the individual level. Sorry, just a second. Delete time. I'm fine with that. Unless logistical issues. So normally when racism shows up, we see it in the way we interact with each other societally, with our social norms, with how we interact with each other. And what normally happens is in those norms, in the standards and the values that are being put forth, those of the dominant racial groups tend to supersede those of the non-dominant racial groups. And that's how we get to experience what, for example, T was explaining about rental processes or job processes where people with certain names get callbacks or will get opportunities before names that are harder to read. People with names that are harder to read may face that kind of discrimination, not kind of, yes, discrimination, as opposed to people with easier names. And these social norms and standards are used to judge how non-dominant group members conform to dominant ideologies. So when racism occurs, people are forced to follow a certain way of thinking or a certain way of doing life within society. And that certain way is based on those in power. So their ideas, their values, their norms are what supersede everything. And so that is why you find situations like when we come into a new country, we are expected to act like the people in that country. When they say you need to act Canadian, the question is even what's Canadian? But there is an expectation or an understanding that being Canadian is a certain way, being American is a certain way, being European is a certain way. And so you are expected to behave that way. But that way is based on those ideologies of those dominant groups. Any comments so far? Questions to this point? Wonderings? No questions, no wonderings? Yes.
Thank you.
Hi.
Thank you for.
You can introduce yourself, that would be good.
Nice to meet you.
Training. Sometimes this is just only two but question power. Someone sees you, they don't even know why you're there. They just see and then they see you.
Throw out some arrows.
Yeah, so it's one of them. Yeah, it's one of those things that with power, but sometimes
That, yes, because there is almost an entitlement. There is almost an entitlement.
A lot of entitlement.
Yes.
This is mine.
Yeah.
But that actually there's no power there, but someone is paid for, someone is entitled to themselves.
Yeah.
Something that
there is an inherent power in the structure, in the system, that because their values are what lead. So people feel entitled to that, this is my place, this is my land, this is my this. So when you come in, you're kind of invading this space. So you either conform or you don't belong. So that's it is, and we will talk a little bit about internalized racism, because that's what it is. So something about race. When we talk about race, what do you understand by the concept of race? Let's put racism here, and let's think about defining race. What is race? Yes. Ethnicity, okay. What else is race? How do you tell that somebody is of a certain race? Those of you online, you're also invited to respond. Skin tone. Mhm. You know, I didn't know about the nose thing until I moved to North America. And then I was like, people say Black people have big noses. I didn't know that. The nose. Yeah. Yeah, that's painful. So for me, I don't know when did you first when did race first become a thing for you? When did you first pay attention to race?
When I came here.
When you came here,
When I came
you
to
realized that
I realized I'm a Black
that you're
woman.
Black.
Oh, really? Because that was never an issue, right? Yeah.
What, share your experience, please.
Welcome.
Mhm. Yeah. So
There's another hand in there.
yeah, we have somebody who's sharing. She's from China, and she never paid attention to race until she came here, and you know, it became a thing that she's Chinese. Something she never thought about. Yes. Mhm. I have a young person here who's sharing a very interesting story. She didn't pay attention to her skin tone until about middle school. And that's when, you know, she realized that she is different. My question to you, though, is at what point did you ever feel powerless? Because if you've grown up with other individuals of different races, but you've all grown up here, you play together, there's not, you know, skin color is not a thing. But then at some point you realize that you have to pay attention to yourself. Did you ever feel powerless? Okay. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing, because that now hits the nail on the head, right? So I don't know whether the rest of you heard what she said. Are you on Zoom as well? No? Okay, so she went into class when she came here from the UK, In the UK, there were more Black students, but in Canada, there were fewer Black students. And when she got into class, she started paying attention when things, say, went missing, and she was assumed to have been the one who took them. Or when negative things happened, it was placed on her, and negative stereotypes as well, placed on her. And this happens a lot with our children that we have here. I'm a mom of 4 and a grandma of 1. Whoa. That excites me. I didn't talk about that in the beginning. I tell a lot about myself as we go. But, you know, I have the 2 who kind of grew up here as little. And it's been interesting to just watch that play out for them and to empower them. But yes, fitting those stereotypes that as children who are born in Canada don't even feel like they fit, right? It like the children born here are like, why do you think I'm an immigrant? Or where do you come from? Where, you know, kind of being told that they are not from here. And it kind of hurts because, you know, it's there. See, you had your hand up? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And you can see the power, who makes the decisions and in whose favor are those decisions made. It's not just who makes them, but who is favored in the decision and who's not favored, who's left out. Or if you are given a piece, how big is it, right? Or where is it located if it's land? Is it prime land or is it rejected land? Any other comments there, T? Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I realized racism here was affected so much. Just grateful and
Oh, wow. Yeah. And we'll kind of get into that. But yeah, that's where you kind of feel it. You feel the pinch, where again, you are invited into a space, but then even within the space, who gets to speak? Or whose ideas do you get to adopt? Or do your ideas get heard? Or who even listens to those ideas, right? Or whose ideas are you supposed to take without questioning? There's that piece too. So sometimes when we talk about race, the way I look at it is race is more of a perception. Somebody looks at you because of your physical characteristic, they develop a perception in their mind about you. I actually wrote a question. Do all dark-skinned people see themselves as belonging to the same race? No? Yeah? Do all dark-skinned people see themselves as belonging to the same race? There are dark-skinned people from India. Do they see themselves as the same race as Africans?
No, they don't.
Is India Europe or Asia? Do Indians see themselves as Asians? There is, then they, you know, a lot of times you hear Asia, then there's the Eastern Europe. Like you find that there is all these little distinctions that are being placed because somebody somewhere is trying to disempower another group. There are dark-skinned people in South America. The first time I actually saw an all-black South American soccer team, I was in shock. Is it Costa Rica? No. There is one where the entire soccer team. Okay, just a second, just one little thing. Yeah, so do these see themselves as one and the same? Would they meet you and feel like You're my brother. Do African Americans see Africans the same way?
No.
It's again.
I'm originally from Nigeria, and France that don't see themselves same.
Exactly. Even within, right? So somebody wants to unmute and share. Who's that, T? Yes, Mr. Daniel, can you please unmute and come on camera, please? You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing these ideas. What I wanted to explain is for a slightly older person like me, I lived in this world when racism was actually legal.
Just give me 1 second. I can't really hear you. Can you increase the volume? Yeah. There we go. Okay, I think now.
Can you hear me now?
Excellent. We can all hear you.
Okay, I said for a person of my age, I'm in my 60s, I lived in this world when racism was actually legal. Okay, where it was, the law actually separated people on the basis of race all over the world, even in Canada here. From about, since Canada, about 1913 to the 1960s, Canada did not welcome any Black people. It was illegal for Black people to immigrate to Canada. The US actually treated these Black people as second-class citizens, and they still do. So what has changed is the law has changed, but the attitude in the people who live here has not. So racism is just going underground, but it's there all the time.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for sharing. I love when seniors share. I love when young people share, because those of us. I know I'm heading to the senior side of things too, soon here as a grandma. But I love the sharing because we get those perspectives, right? When the law changes, but the attitudes don't change. And the question is, which I would pose, has the law really changed? Has the law really changed? Because I look at the example I would really give, and I love this example. I hope you love it alongside with me. If somebody abuses a child, what happens to them? Sexual abuse or physical abuse, what happens?
They're arrested.
They're arrested. If you're a teacher, a social worker, somebody, and you're working with a child and the child discloses to you that they are abused, what are you expected to do? Yeah. Yeah, there is a duty to report, right? There is a duty to report when it comes to sexual abuse, physical abuse, sometimes emotional. There is a duty to report. But is there a duty to report when it comes to racism? If somebody has been racist, is there a law that says do this? So one of the reasons why it keeps happening and never goes anywhere is there's no duty to report. There's nothing that's going to be done. It is what it is. So the law changed to allow people in, but the law did not change to protect those individuals. That's the sad part. So reverse racism. This is a term which people fight over. What is reverse racism? If it's a thing, what is it? I love the word retaliation. Anybody online who knows what reverse racism is? I write the word crocodile tears. Because usually, have you ever heard of a white person accusing a black person of being racist?
Yes.
Is someone unmuting? I don't know who that was, but thought I had a voice. That is, reverse racism, when somebody in a position of power, and they may not even know that they are in positions of power, but the systems support them in those positions. When they turn around and say, no, you're being racist towards me because maybe you've called them out, or maybe you've said something. But the reality is the power doesn't go away. Sometimes they even have the power to silence you after whatever you've said. So then there is the internalized racism. What is internalized racism? You alluded to it really well. Naomi has a question. Come on forward, Naomi, please.
Isn't racism, like, can it go both ways? Instead of it only being pointed to Black people, can it also be pointed to all races, especially white people?
I like how you say especially white people. When we are talking of racism, there is a power dynamic involved there. There is a power piece. Do you think if a Black person is being nasty towards a white person, they hold the same amount of power?
Depends on the context. If the Black person owns the business.
Yeah, but systemically, deeply. So it's a question, something to ponder, because there is that element. Sorry, I missed the chat. I don't know how to access it over here.
Yeah.
Chat.
Take it from
Yeah, just a second. I missed what the question. See, you're my reader. You're my reader. There is a question that flashed past. We have some people who've joined us. You're welcome. Welcome. So check for the question.
Was it typed?
Yes.
If the majority being uncomfortable, angry with them, like I can say. Can the person able to read?
Are you able to come on? Can you let me see?
We can change it to you. We actually change it to this now. If that works better. Yes, we can change it.
Depending on the situation, yes. It's the majority being uncomfortable, angry with an even playing field. It's okay.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Change of guard. So I'm on a different machine now. You have to kind of, I don't know how you're going to do it. Maybe get off totally. No, because you're the one in the shot. You know what? Add spotlights. Okay. I'll remove spotlight from you.
Steve, can you come?
No, that's okay. I've removed you.
Okay, thank you.
The only thing is I need to see people. I like seeing people. Oh. Oh. I need to bring back my spotlight because I lost you. Spotlight. Okay. All right. I'm back. Change of technology. Technology is a lovely thing, but we have 1,000 laptops here, so you won't lose us. All right. We were talking about internalized racism. So what is internalized racism? When we think of internalized racism, what is that? You're not sure?
Just since we, I don't want to say anything, but many white people, they just, I don't know whether they do it knowingly or they learn it from somewhere, because like she was saying, children grow up together like that age, they are playing in daycare. And then when they are in grade 1, they go to university, and then all of a sudden they are not as close as they were. So where is that coming from? Because they were friends. At one time they were sleeping over, doing everything. But then all of a sudden, by the time they go to work, they are not as close as they were when they were
In
young.
school.
So there's something or someone or some people who are just like throwing it out there for them to know that you are different.
So an example I like to give is back home. If you think of back home, and I'm going to use back home as a general phrase. Did you ever have tribes of people that were seen differently from others? Yes. Or seen as inferior from others? How did you know that? How did you learn that they are inferior?
The adults are talking about it.
Adults talk about it.
They are not allowed into particular ceremonies or processes that involves culture.
Okay. So normally what happens is over the years, discrimination and bias gets passed down. They'll tell you, don't go to that family, don't talk to those people, don't hang out with that group, and so on. So it gets passed down so much so that it becomes a part. You don't even know why you have an issue with that person or that tribe. If you're asked, like, what is your personal issue? What's your issue with Black people? The only thing that's going to be regurgitated is what was told to you, but not a personal experience.
Many times it's not.
Yeah. So you find that people have internalized, it's become a part of the culture, it's become a part of the social norms, it's become a part of the, like when you're in an elevator and somebody grabs their bag, have they really had their bag snatched away from them before by a Black person? Likely not, right? But it's there, it's sitting in there. So Zama says, I think internalized racism, I think stereotypes about certain racial groups. That too, internalized stereotypes. This is what we hear about Black people. I don't know, I don't have personal experience, but it's what I've heard and it's what I'll go with. Before you, somebody at the back had a hand.
I mean, let's go first. How can what happened in certain points?
Yeah.
I think what's important info is about Black history might also be an impact. And the reason why I said so is this. During Black History Month, one of the group of teenagers I used to have a class meet, that she just said I experienced in class that week that we were talking about Black history, was talking about how slavery and all of that. And then one of my classmates made a comment like, my grandfather was my grandfather's slave, so I can become my slave now. So I also feel that stuff might also be feeding some level of superiority mentality to this generation. And the way I see it is we should also, even though some of this stories is true, I think, we should also tell our story. Black history not just the same story about slavery and people's oppression. You know, we talk about value. Value is a Black or African history. So it's really not the motive side of the story that we said in this story. And it's also project with positivity. Black is this, we are strong. You know, so many things you know, in that line. So that narrative, even in the school system, aside probably whatever their background in their family, wherever citizens, even in the school, what's this thing? But for me, I thought it was really upsetting. I think that's me, you know,
So the people on Zoom, just to reiterate the story is this lady here was working with young people, and the stories they were learning during Black History Month were about slavery. And one of the kids said, oh, so your grandfather was my grandfather's slave, so you can be my slave. And she's saying that more of our stories need to be told. You know, and I normally use the phrase, the stories we inherit, to talk about internalized racism. What are the stories we inherit? Now, I have no problem with our stories being told. My question is, do our stories have a place? We can tell our story, but do our stories have a platform? Do they have a place? This is where the work is, right? For us to make sure that our stories actually matter. Because we could tell them the whole day, but if the curriculum doesn't have space for them, if the law doesn't have space for our story, if overall the systems that live don't have space for our stories to actually take root and make a difference, that's where the power issue is. Whose story gets to be told and how? Who gets to tell whose story? What parts of the story get to be told? Because if we think of the white story in Canada, there are negative parts to the white story, right? But do those stories get told enough? Or do we hear, or even when we hear them, is there anyone who condemns them? And how far does that go? So it's thinking about that power differential of whose story gets to be told and how, who gets to tell it, because we may want to tell the story. Do we have the platforms? Are we creating those platforms? Yes.
It's not unwritten rule. It's being conquered. Those who listen to story number one. Another point I want to say, the reason people are like that with the racism, it's insinuation even with TV. You watch stuff like that, the black person be an athlete or a gangster. Something like stuff like that. If I get on the subway now, some people essentially 2 times. Like the time you give this someone who asks you for a light or a wrist, just because I'm black, they assume I smoke. They haven't seen me smoking. I don't have a light. I'll be asked for a light or a wrist. That's happened to me like 30 times. Most of the time, and what makes you say that the person is like, I just thought you thought what?
Very internalized, right?
Yeah.
A gentleman here is sharing is sharing a personal story about he's gotten targeted by individuals, say on the train, right? Asking him Oh, sorry, the room we are in is playing power tricks on us. So the room we are in is power tricks. So if you see us going in and so you want me to use it. I like this one for the chat. Sorry. No, that's okay. It's back, but the okay. Bear with us, bear with us.
Spotlight.
Yeah. And I can see the chat. Thank you. Yes. So, yeah, those of you wherever you are, keep praying for the internet, please. Intercession. We need that. Our internet is acting up, but here we are. So we're giving examples of internalized racism where people have that discrimination and biases based on generations of information that's been passed down and reinforced and stories told that people don't even question the premise of those stories. They just act the way they have been taught to act or told to act, regardless, without those questions. Yes. Oh, yes, Tim.
I just wanted to reflect on the fact that when we do Black History Month here, the emphasis actually is not on our history.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather fought in the Second World War, and I know this because I remember going to his house and seeing the photograph. But his own father was not enslaved. He may have fought in the Second World War, but 5 generations back and free. So I came to the West as a free girl, removed from slavery. So why do we not talk about our freedom from our past? We were not enslaved.
Mm-hmm.
I know where my great-grandfather was buried.
Mm-hmm.
He was not a slave. When we talk about slavery, it's enough. It may not be enough American construct, but we roots in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Brazil. So our history has been more the pride that we brought here. It's not recognized here. I don't talk about it because I was raised with pride. I'm proud of your woman stuff, you know. But no one talks about that pride. Being Black, being an African. It's all gone.
I love how you're saying that. T is sharing about how our story of the Black person doesn't get told as well and as often as it should be. The story that gets told is a story that not many Black people actually resonate with, because not every Black person has their personal history steeped in slavery, right? So that's why I say, does every Black person see themselves as the same? Right? So we are Black, our skin tone puts us together, but our stories are. But then another thing that you said, T, which will our stories don't get told often enough. Who's supposed to tell our story?
It's going to tell people listening, but stand here and let's talk and you can tell it all the time.
Someone said you need someone to listen. Who tells the white story? Who tells the white man's story?
The TV.
Do we have access to media? What do we use media for? How many of you watch Nigerian movies? How many of you watch Nigerian movies? And I'm not saying there's anything bad with this, but I'm just laying things out. How many of you have watched a Nigerian movie? What story gets told in the Nigerian movie? But what narrative gets told? Witchcrafts, the love triangles, love drama, a little bit of government. Is that the story that you want to be told about you? And I'm not saying that it's bad, like Nollywood is bad, but I'm just trying to show that which is why I said, when I'm invited to do things like this, I like us to think about where the shift is, right? Where the shift is. If we want our story to be told differently, guess who's going to tell that story differently, right? Are we telling it in the books? Are we writing? Are we speaking out? Or are we just complaining? How many times do we do more complaining than actually sharing more of ourselves? Most of the time we are complaining, right? Not that we shouldn't. I'm just saying, like, that balance. We have to find a balance of search for justice at the same time telling our stories. Yes, Miss T.
So I just wanted to add that based on what that one year said about we need to tell our stories, but we stand by the streets in front of the bus telling our stories. Who will listen? But this storytelling starts simple. I tell them in my life story where she actually knows, including the people, like empty myself, like my dad, empty himself. I was close to my grandmother. I know the story of how to know my grandfather. I know the equal. I was close to you. I like you as well. So oral stories never die. And this is how we perpetuate ourselves, our secure our immortality. But if we don't treat our Canadian children well, we treat them as Canadians. By the time they grow up, cultural history is lost on them. The question which my great grandmother's graveside. I want her to, because that woman fed me, I have to feed her too. My dad, she can tell our children, and it starts not from the grave, it starts from now. We have to tell the story, good on the book, but more so our children, more so, let's keep telling, the stories of how we grow up and our culture, I think. Only because my dad told me the stories I started hearing. So I'm very afraid now.
You then.
Great, because that's how the racism is fueled.
Through story. Somebody told me that if you ever, this was a comment, if you ever sat on white people's kitchen table and heard how they talk about Black people, you would never talk to some of your white friends again. And I was like horrified. I was horrified. Same thing, right? How do stories get passed down? I'm not saying all of them do that, but that's what I was told, right? Why are you laughing?
It's experience. Like I come from Zimbabwe, right? And there's schools there, like around the school, you have like in a dorm, 16 boys, like 6 hours, 16 boys. Out of the 16 boys, 5 of them are Black. I have the right? So because we can afford to go to the school, we may focus in general. They were always telling you are not like you. So it's like, oh, you're not like those. No, not someone like this, So yeah, they were so different. And sometimes for me, you go to boarding, you go to school for 6 years. Sometimes you come past.
Yeah, I went to boarding school, so I know.
Cheating someone right? Sometimes you quite straight up and you hear it even there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so
yeah, stories get passed down. That's how information gets passed down. Even if we are talking about, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you a question. My sister from China, if you don't want to answer it, don't. What does the word black mean in Chinese? And I know Chinese language. In Chinese.
Black.
Yeah, but what does it mean? Yeah, whichever one you speak. What does it mean? In the reason why I want that story, it's not your I am muted. Sorry, guys. So, yeah, just how language goes, right? You had your hand up, sister? I'm good. I did.
I think it starts from also many platforms. We can do that, not just in our everyday life, we have different platforms to tell us to. For example, I have a very good friend from this that I was living before, and he's Muslim. They do different programs in my office. And okay, we were in worship together as well, and then she had the opportunity to talk about herself or where she's from on the road. I'm a Nigerian. She spoke about Nigeria. I felt like I was proud. My head was sweating. I mean, there are things that I normally would read all we complain about Nigerians, how we treat each other and how we treat people that are not like us. The way she presented that meeting, I was impressed. I was proud of us. Something, she said, we're very hospitable. Now, when you see people like us, I'm sure I'm saying this all you understand what I'm trying to say, how we complain about it, but she started me off my feet. She was a beautiful, she's a the world. She is an extremely positive ambassador for who she is. Of course, you can complain now. Every culture, every country have their issues. If you go to some comments on things happening in this place, and you hear some non-Africans complain about it, you will know that people are complaining about it. So we all have our pain points, but when we have the opportunity for the platform, it could be taking your colleague at work. It could be even making a presentation, or saying the stories to the kids, or what many platforms, just being that ambassador for, people, no matter what it is, to project our self, our country, our heritage, wherever, and tell our story in a positive, like in a light that,
Yeah, tell your story, right? There is a song that goes, be the hero of your story when it's done. We need to be the heroes of our stories, because there is the opposite. What's the opposite of internalized racism? No. Internalized oppression. It's kind of like not opposite, but the other thing. The internalized oppression, where somebody says, yeah, for us, we are Black, people don't like us, there's nowhere we'll go and we get jobs, you see, no one will give us this, no one will give us a shot, where you take on the story and allow it to be your story. And that's a major error that we make. where we take the story that is being told about us and we own it and we walk around with it like it's a badge of honor, instead of correcting the narrative and saying, absolutely not. This is it. I will tell it differently. Instead, we walk around saying, yeah, you know, this country is racist, blah, blah, blah. Hey, this country is racist, but guess what? This country gives you opportunities to speak. So instead of talking about this country being racist, how about this country gives us those opportunities to speak, where we can talk here about racism, and we are not even worried about anyone storming in and taking us, chaining us. There are places where you just can't do that, right? But isn't that a positive, that we can even have these conversations, right? So that's the opposite. My daughter had something to say.
I was just thinking that you would want to tell people of color, people, black people, that your story, and see that you can find other people who are similar. But also sometimes you see another black person that's telling your story, and like, yeah, it's the same, and then let's move on. So you're thinking, okay, if I tell like black people that look like me and that they don't want to hear it, like they cut it and measure it, then like how's my story different from we all look the same? Kind of that mindset, and then you say, okay, let's hear someone else who someone else is talking. So like on social media sometimes there used to be like a lot of my 40 page on TikTok used to be black people speaking and talking about these things. But then all of a sudden it kind of just stopped, and then you now see like people of the opposite race talking about these things instead. And then the comments will be like, oh, I guess the black people had enough of airing themselves, so something like that. Because they just see like, okay, I look like me, she looks like me, I guess our story is the same. And then you just do that. So when you say everyone has story to, is it that we share it to each other, or we share it to people that don't like, that look different to me, that I know for sure.
I love that question. So she's asking, she's mentioning that sometimes when we tell our stories, we tell the same story to each other, and everyone almost has a similar experience. But how do we change this? And I think a missing piece is the tone. What tone do we take when we are telling the story? Are we always telling the negative stories, or are we telling stories of triumph and success? And some people may say, oh, I don't have success. Well, if you walk around feeling like you're not successful, guess what? You will find all the evidence that you are not successful. That is kind of like, I want to buy a Mercedes. Guess what you're going to see on the road? Mercedes, right? So you keep seeing yourself as unsuccessful, as, I don't know, you in this country as a black person, you'll never survive. Guess what? You will see all the evidence. And then every story you hear is going to be that. And it's exhausting. It's actually exhausting to listen to all the stories of failure versus, can you get tired of good news? No. I don't think we can get tired of good news. And I think we need more of that, because we do have those stories of good news, and we can have good news as well. It doesn't mean that we don't have bad news. Bad news exists, but how did we triumph over the bad news? And sometimes it's, a little hard. I would give a break, but the people on Zoom don't have a break, so that's the only thing. So we'll keep going and then cut it, right? Not a lot, because we've kind of touched on most things. Yeah. So a few other things to think of are microaggressions. Who does not know what a microaggression is? You all know what that is? You don't know what? Who knows what a microaggression is? Can you?
I work in IT. So I've heard this talk about more in male-female relationships. Because I work in a sector that male dominated.
Yes.
And sometimes the way it's spoken of is where maybe a lady that speaks up is seen as being domineering, whereas a guy that speaks up is seen as being competent at what they do. So there's two people doing the same thing, but they're perceived differently. So yeah, it's more of a gender lens from the way we thought about it, but I could imagine also on the racial lens, I guess something like the myth of the angry black man, for example.
Angry black woman.
So maybe maybe your voice is a bit louder than what's expected, which sometimes because we shout loud. So it's because you're living your life and someone's still you're shouting something.
Yeah, we've led other conversations in therapy with therapists, and if a black person is not receiving the treatment they need in hospital or in therapy, they're going to be animated, right? And that can be sometimes seen as, they're crazy. It's kind of evidence that you're crazy. But yeah, so microaggressions are usually commonplace. It's their little slights, little commonplace nuances that will show up in terms of the speaking, the behaving, like what you've shared, if a black person speaks up for themselves, something's not right here. I don't think they belong here. They are aggressive. They are negative. Something's, whereas when when a white person speaks up, they are seen to be competent and confident and strong. But the minute you show that confidence, and sometimes you can preface the conversation and say, hey, because you can tell when someone's looking at you and they're like afraid of you, almost wanting to run away. And you can actually say that. These are some of the things we fear to say. You can say, you know what? I'm speaking up, not because of anything, but because I am confident. I'm confident in what I know and in what I'm telling you. I am not working on being aggressive here. I am just sharing with you because this is what it is. Sometimes we have to spell these things out for people. It's sad, but it's true. Yeah. Just a second, and thanks for leading this conversation, talking about success. It's rare seeing this in a racism conversation. Thank you. So within microaggressions, sometimes they are intentional, sometimes they are unintentional because of the internalized piece, right? They can be unintentional, but they are usually derogatory as well and negative. Then or the racist person demonstrating microaggressions. They are tiny things that, I don't know, have you been in a situation where you get asked after you do something, someone has been with you for a while, then you do something and they're like, where are you from?
Oh yeah. So
it's kind of like,
interrupt. There was a week that I attended 4 different meetings. And these were not work meetings. These were my social interactions for Aspire Hub. And in each of those meetings that week, every one of them asked me, where am I from? And I told them I'm Canadian. It almost sounded as if they didn't believe me.
Because of what you're doing.
Do you get so I asked her, why did you ask where I was? Because that's not the first question I would ask you. I actually literally turned that meeting into like a multiculturalism conversation. Are you asking me the country of my birth or the country of my citizenship? She's like, I'm sorry. Like, this person from this is Zoom. It wasn't even in person. I know, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. You just seem to have an accent. I said, yeah, I do. And I rock it.
And so do you.
I do. Like I do. I'm aware of my accent, that my tongue rolls differently. Yes. But behind this rolling is a lot because I've come a long way. And here that I'm in front of you, I have something to offer you. If you want to listen, listen. If you don't want to listen, your loss. So in that moment, if I wasn't confident of who I am, I would feel some form of microaggression and probably she didn't even mean it. She didn't even mean to hurt me or to, but she just assumed that if you have an accent or a base accent, you do not belong, you came from somewhere else. And I said, yeah, I'm originally from Nigeria. So do you want to know the meaning of my name? Like I took 10 minutes of that meeting to talk about my background, my person, where I am from, the meaning of my name, the Yoruba people of Western Nigeria, and the meaning of my name. And it became positive in the end. But I could have been offended and walked away like, these people have come again. So I guess microaggression is also very subjective, just like what you said.
Yeah, and that is it. That's a very good example of the storytelling piece. How do you change the story? How do you change? Those are the opportunities. Every time these situations come, those are our opportunities to teach. So those of you who are asking, where do I tell my story? That is where you tell the story. When it's coming at you, you turn it into your story. Take the stage away. Take the mic away. Yes.
Yeah.
He was going to say something, but you choose.
I remember walking somewhere where they went to complain to the management that the smell was our food.
Oh, yeah.
And so the manager was like, we like to go to this, but I want to go to this. We should bring it as there's no smell. And I said, how that I have not come to the government of the world to them and allow the community. The work makes their own government and makes our own but I don't think that is being there. And then we think for you, because no, it doesn't mean like how exactly do you? And that's really that everybody can do that. And so not something not say that some people not do. I mean, what's the use about my food that I what that person is your right? People that I like all these things and who can learn that I don't get to say everybody and not maybe to work together. But I have that right. So that's the thing I think without really don't forget maybe I'm not be something that so we said we should do and so we don't do it. I think it's not busy.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a great example, and it's not the first time I've had this. A lot of people, even kids, take their food to school, and they are told that their food is funny, or it smells funny, or it looks funny, and then the kids bring the food back and they just throw it in the garbage, and they can't tell the parent because they know it will hurt the parent. So then they struggle with that. And, these are some of the conversations. That's why I like talking about this thing. These are some of the conversations that you need to have with your children. They may not tell you. They may be afraid to tell you. They may be afraid to tell you that, I'm struggling with my food. I'm struggling with my food at school. People don't like the smell of my food. And so all you see is the child throwing the food out. So instead of being upset that the food is being thrown out, understanding that this child might actually be facing something, so allowing that child to actually bring that conversation forward without being judged for throwing out the food. Because you need to understand the why behind the action, right? But if you're upset, this child is not going to tell you. And this is why a lot of our children, now there's because I also teach parenting. Now the conversation is changing. This is why our children don't tell us when people are racist towards them. So because they're afraid of the parents' constant reaction, because we tend to overreact with our kids, So they hide those conversations from us and they take matters into their own hands and fight. And the next thing is you're picking up your child from school because they've been suspended. So normalize those conversations in the home, empower the children, empower them to actually, how do you handle if somebody doesn't like your food? If the child actually, oh my goodness, I've just remembered, I met a lady, actually one of my students, she's white and her husband's African. And she said her son loves goat head. And he wanted to take the goat head to school with the teeth intact. And she's like, I told him, no, we are already a Black family. Don't do this to us. So the food is a very interesting conversation in workplaces, in schools. But you kind of have to, as someone is saying, flip the script. She flipped the script and said, just because I'm not saying anything, it doesn't mean your food doesn't smell bad for me. I just let it be. It's kind of like accent. How much do we struggle to hear the Canadian accent? We also sometimes struggle, right? But we'll hear. But when somebody says they don't understand you, sometimes I'm like, I made an effort to understand you. So, honey, just make an effort to understand me. Him first.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who
This is longer than 2 hours, my sister.
in one form or the other. First, I think we made mention of when and how do we speak up. And I think it ties back to what my sister said about, first we need to remove ourselves from the situation. We look at it not when you're in the bubble, within the bubble there, it's easy to live it on. If I know the level in which I can raise my voice, naturally I speak loud. But I know that for some reasons, if I'm speaking to some set of people, I need to intentionally review
lower your voice.
My voice so that they label me as angry. I'm not angry. Deep down, I know I'm not angry, but I need to reduce the tone of my voice so I can pass the message across. That is the first thing. The second one, I don't go out telling people my story. There's no point. Not everybody I meet out there wants to tell me their story. So why am I telling mine? So even when you're making the efforts to ask, I need to know from you, what's this driving that? Why do you want to know where I'm from? So when I understand the concept behind you wanting to know, it helps me to educate you. So if you ask me where are you from, my first question is, why do you want to know? Then the next question is, where do you know in Africa? So I use that as an opportunity to start giving you what the narrative that I want you to know. So I think we should first understand people. People are raised differently. There are people that have never in their life seen a Black man before. That fellow is going to react differently when I step into his organization. I work in places where I'm dealing with a Black person. I need to understand, okay, this institution have been for years, and there is a way they've been acting and they've been doing things. Now I need to first understand them, then bring in what works for me, for them to understand me. So if you tell me you cannot pronounce my name, I need to ask you, I'll write out Arnold Schwarzenegger and I say pronounce it. And then you pronounce Arnold Schwarzenegger, and then you cannot pronounce my name with just maybe 7 or 8 letters. I say you need to put in the effort because I'm putting the effort to pronounce your name. So, but I cannot do that when I'm seen as being offended. I cannot do that if I'm coming with the mindset or I'm angry because you can't pronounce my name. No. We need to first, you made a mistake, it's fine. I understand that mistakes, but when you can see from the top that this is how I spell my name, and just you calm down and you cannot speak in that name.
Yeah, thank you. You raised good points. Yeah. And it kind of goes back to the beginning where we started talking about power, right? So whose values are running the system, whose everything is running the system. So sometimes we have to compromise those values, right? But it doesn't mean we give up ours. Actually, the way I see it is we have the opportunity to straddle. We are lucky we can do this, right? We know how to go in, we know how to go out and step into our culture. We go back in, we go back out. But back to telling your story. Telling a story is not necessarily just the story of where you're born. Even just your name, that's part of your story. Just pronounce my name. That's part of you, your story. So when you're telling a story, you're going to be telling different parts of you. You know, she's talking about different parts of her, you're talking about those different parts of you. So that's the story, not necessarily your whole life story. That one is a hard one to tell for many of us, because what part of my life story? I introduced myself to you, but there are parts I didn't tell you, right? So we, you know, depending on the circumstances and the setting, you get to tell the story. But thank you so much for your submission. And yes, the attitude of being angry doesn't work, or being scared, or being disappointed. Sometimes I find myself in situations where I am scared, and usually it is in situations where I realize that the people I am amongst are not going to change. So I don't bother. And people tell me, why didn't you speak up? And I say, I do not waste my energy on people that I know are not going to, they are not receptive. So what I do, I withdraw. And it shocks people when I do that. They're like, you said nothing. And I'm like, yeah, I prefer to conserve my voice and my energy because it's worthless. I'm gonna do what? Yell at them, force them to understand? Like, no, sometimes you withdraw. It's a fight not worth fighting. But I find other ways to make impact where I'm not using words. Yeah. Okay, someone had a hand up. Can I get to the end? Then I don't have a lot to go. Like just a couple of points to go with microaggression. So there's the micro insults. Those are types of microaggressions where there is a little bit of that rudeness and insensitivity. Okay? I can't understand you. Can you speak slowly?
Whatever that means.
Whatever that means, right? I don't understand you. Like, yeah. Then there are little micro assaults. There are micro assaults where somebody is explicit racial derogation. Oh my God, English. Explicit racial derogations, where somebody is explicitly calling you something and intended to harm you. And the example, when I asked my sister about the meaning of the word black, I remember, how did I know about that? My son was in school and sharing a locker with another kid. They were sharing lockers, and the kid was Chinese. And he had another friend. And every lunchtime, the two friends would come to the locker, and my son had no access to his stuff. So he told this guy who didn't belong that, you know what, it's lunchtime, I need to grab my stuff. Can you move? And then the other kid started saying, black, 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 like an insult. And my son's like, yeah, I'm black, so what? He's like, black, black. So when my son told me that story, I was like, huh, the way you're saying it, it's as if someone is calling you a name. So I went in search of what it means to be black in Chinese. That's how I discovered that it's not necessarily that you're black. They're calling you that bad word almost. It's like when somebody is trying to call you the bad word. Right? So that's how I knew about that. But those assaults. And then there's the micro invalidation, where someone, where did you learn English? How long have you been in Canada? Because they think it's a funeral, right? Yeah.
In my mind, I'm looking for a day where they will change it from black to one.
And call it something else. No, I agree with you actually, because if you think of color, there are only very few races that get color attached to them. Black, white. We say whether you're black, white, Asian, South American, or Latino, they don't use color for the others. They say black, white, Asian, Latino, or European. It's the color only comes when it's like black, white. It's almost like, and of course, colonially, white has a whole other, angels, brides, purity, and all those things. And then black is the other piece, right? So globally, the term black is problematic, definitely. But my last piece is thinking about, and this is thinking about calls to action. What's your next step as an individual? And what's your next step within the institution that say you work? Remember when I gave you the example of children's services? If a child's abused, children's services steps up and that child may be taken away, or the law steps in. But if somebody is racist towards you, nobody steps up, nobody steps in. So there you are, right? With your label, with your anger that somebody has been racist, but so that is me this evening, but that doesn't mean that I don't get to hear from the two people before I close down.
And I was like, this is putting on sleeping. I'm just like, meanwhile, here, and it's that I'm the one who doesn't know how to, communicate. But then when I change how I speak from doing and transform my speaking, and it can't say that this when I'm with other people outside like you do that. So I cannot limit the way they're talking to me. So I feel like the accent thing is more about being understood than about like, or you're being fake or like attack. Because even here, white people, not all white people from like the same people can be, yeah. And there was even I was in hospital and I was having dinner, and I was like, this could be a fascinating thing, and I have to adapt a lot of times. And I put it in like, oh, we tried that. So, the same thing, but then absence of not always.
Yeah, I know. I agreed with you. It's only when it comes with a statement of, oh, where is your accent from? Yeah, I have different responses. I won't use them here. We have people around. So
Yeah, I just wanted to actually comment on what you said. That was really good. I think is to educate people, but it's a skill. It's actually to learn. So after this, I think
It's and we are
Call to action.
So now we are learning, we are almost getting to where we don't get offended with everything and that's like. There was a time when we get all over, but now it's like some people are really ignorant. Just so you know. And she said in the accent it's all about the understood sometimes. Many times. Because we in Africa we learn we do syllables. So when we are I can pronounce anyway. I can try to. My name is Nomsa, like 5 letters. Someone will tell you, how do I shorten your name? Like, no, it's already short. So it's like you have to learn to be like, oh,
You didn't
like Nomsa.
You didn't do registration.
Instead of like, no, it's short already, but it's a skill that you have to learn. So at one time I was working somewhere and then I was the only black course. And then one customer was in line, I was passing through, it was in a bank, my office was somewhere. So they just saw this black person coming. She was like, are you from the magic? So I said, excuse me, I did home. Okay. I can house. So the customer said his manager, it's not even my manager, was like, talk to you. How are you talking to her like that? She asked if I knew for my mom to film. Oh, she wants to make conversation. I'm like, really? You don't make conversation by us someone they're homeless. She's like,
yeah.
You didn't know the meaning of the word nomadic.
And I think this is where I like what your comment has placed in my head. This is where some of our work is going to be teaching people how to talk to other people. Like, how should white people talk to non-white people? How do you ask? And these can be workshops we do. How can you ask for more information? How can you start a conversation without feeling awkward? Right? Because we come from, the difference is we come from collective cultures where we have different tribes. So we have been cultured to communicate with different people differently. And I'm not saying they are not cultured, but we have those different, cultures going on. So we know if you're talking to these people, you talk a certain way. If you're talking to a grown-up, you talk a certain way. But here you can even call your mother by their name, right? So I think those are the conversations we could have. I find that Black History Month is a good time, although my sister doesn't want the word Black, it's a good time. I will not forget that. It's a good time to actually talk to the people we work with, for example. Put on a workshop and just do those little things. I used to do an international conference where I would give people little scripts and they would emulate a person from a different part of the world. And you meet at a conference and you have to talk, but you're from different parts of the world. It was so funny because some people couldn't really speak because no one would allow a word in. But that is something we actually can do. Do you want to learn how to talk to Black people? Like, seriously. Because a lot of people are like, I hope I don't offend you if I say this, but can I say it this way? Yeah. So people don't know how to talk. So call to action, something for Aspire to do. Yeah.
That is this held in the other community? Because you can't say like a lot of experience. You have to speak as well because some microaggressions from this person or for where you live.
We are struggling because we are the ones who are disempowered. So we are trying to rise to the top The person who's up there, whose system is working for them, I didn't even go into systemic racism because we kind of have experienced it in hospitals, in schools, and so on. But if a person who is in a place where their system works for them, everything works for them, it's very hard for them to worry about educating themselves. Now, just a second. I have to say, because of time, we've kind of come to the end, but don't worry, we'll talk. Thank you so much for having me and for allowing me to share my thoughts, my experiences. And I thank you so much for those who've shared your experiences, your thoughts. And it may have seemed like a one-sided conversation. It is not. It is just a comma, right? It's just a comma. Things may be happening in Asian families, or Indian families, Chinese families, other families. These things do happen. But I hope you're able to take a leaf, to borrow some ideas, even if the examples are from the Black community, to borrow those and use them. So thank you, Aspire Hub, for having us.
Thank you, doctors. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me appreciate Dr. Miriam. Thank you. I just heard the sister today.
You did.
Our sweetest
You
star.
did.
So this is just the beginning. This is the first of 6 workshops yet to come. We are just starting. We're going to have 2 workshops in August. I'm looking out because I'm talking to people in the audience. Sorry, I'm trying. How did you do it? You were in the Zoom the entire time. Yeah, so we have 5 more workshops to come. We have 2 in August. The next one is on August 12th. Yes, Saturday. We are going to be in person in Calgary, so you can join us. Yeah, those of us in Edmonton or in other parts of the province or even other part of the country, you will have a Zoom link to join us. But if you are in Calgary, you will be hosting us in person in Calgary. So we are taking the hanging there. The Zoom link next after that on the 19th is like back to back for the 2 weeks, but that one is even fun. We are back in Edmonton. We are going to have a barbecue. It's going to be really, really interesting. We have another interesting topic to talk about. The next one is going to be leadership and anti-racism. We have a thing that shows all the workshops, but it just wasn't going to pop. So in your email, you will see everything that we're going to be sending you, all the other topics that we are going to be covering in the next few workshops. So stay with us, don't go away. And every day you show up, tell your story. You are telling your story by living it. Every time you show up with confidence, you are telling your story. You are telling a story of resilience, of confidence, of that I belong. That's one thing I do. Every spaces that I go into, I go in there like, thank you for having me, because I belong here. Because I've got what it takes to be here. I've come a long way. I came in here with a few boxes, but I earned my spot. So you earned your spot, okay? Don't go in with inferiority complex. That's what we teach the student. So in the summer, coming in another 2 weeks, we are having a Tech Plus. If you have youth between the age of 9 and 19, we have robotics, we have coding, we have web development, website design, and then video editing. And we also teach leadership. We teach financial literacy. We teach some of these coping skills, how to be smart on the street, because they got to be smart, how to speak, when to speak, and all of those cool stuff that helps them to become leaders. Because that we don't have enough representation in leadership. And that's why, and that is part of inequities we are talking about. So if you think there is no racism among us, you lie. So it is still out there. Unfortunately, it's 2023. We thought we wish we shouldn't be having these conversations, but these conversations are still here for the next little while. So stay with us as we talk together on how to navigate these issues. It's going to be fun. It's not the most fun stories or fun things to talk about, but we have the company of people like Dr. Miriam to navigate through those waters with us. And we are going to have more facilitators coming in to join this education series. So it will be exciting. And when we are done, all of the resources that we are combining together will be live on our website for people to access anytime, anywhere. I want to acknowledge the sponsorship of the government of Alberta for making this conversation possible. We have been sponsored by the government of Alberta to bring this to our community. So just like Doctor said, this is a big deal. This wouldn't happen some years back. For the government to be empowering us to facilitate this kind of conversations, it means change is here. Means that something needs to flip. So everywhere you are, everywhere you show up, you are an immigrant like someone else's grandfather. You know, we all came in here as immigrants, whether you came or someone else's great-grandfather came. So we belong here. And whether your color is black like mine, one of our kids said, no, we're not black, we're brown. You know, whatever color you are showing up in, please own it and rock it because you belong. Thank you so much for being here. Have a good rest of your evening.